Turn to other news out of Raleigh County. 3 years ago, a baby was born with a rare life-threatening liver disease, but now his family is celebrating his recovery. Our Clayton McChesney visited with the family and brings us the update.
Today, Judah Brooks looks like any other healthy 3-year-old boy, but he wasn't always like this. He was born in 2020 with biliary atresia and at 7 weeks old had a major surgery that is only successful in about 1/3 of the kids with the disease. Unfortunately, Judah was not one of that third. In order to live, he needed a liver transplant.
I was very scared. I did not know anyone personally who had ever had an organ transplant or another child that had had this same disease. So we were really walking into something that we knew nothing about. So it was really a big learning curve and a really quick one at that, because we went from a diagnosis to a transplant in less than a year.
That's because after going to the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, a donor was found in just 5 weeks.
I had a liver transplant.
But things could have been different if there had not been an organ donor available. We spoke to someone from the Center for Organ Recovery and Education, or CORE, who says many people don't register as organ donors due to a mistaken belief that donors won't be cared for in an emergency situation.
When people go to the hospital, in the ambulance, they're trying to save the life in front of them. In the ER, they're trying to save the life that is in front of them. Every doctor, every nurse, they're not checking to see if you are an organ donor. They are seeing what they can do to save your life. And I would say that is the #1 misconception about organ donation.
3 years after his surgery, Judah Brooks is completely healed, with only a scar to remind him of his brush with death. His mother encourages people to learn from this success story and become organ donors themselves.
If you could look at Judah and see how sick Judah was before his transplant and see him now, I don't know how anyone could not register as an organ donor. The transformation that has been made in his life is far bigger than you could ever put into words. Judah wouldn't have lived to see his first birthday if it wouldn't have been for a liver transplant. And since that moment that he had his surgery, he was in the ICU for less than 48 hours, and after that he was sitting up playing and has been a normal, healthy child ever since that day.
Here for you in Coolidge, I'm Clayton McChesney, WVVA News.